You know that feeling, right? That sudden, quiet unease that creeps in the moment. A decision carries weight far beyond just the numbers on a spreadsheet.
Hmm.
It's that profound tension between the rush of urgency, the pressure to act now, and then this deep ethical obligation to be responsible for the consequences.
That internal friction is exactly what our sources are getting at.
Yeah,
They argue that ethical decision-making is no longer just a virtue that's nice to have.
right.
It's now what they call a stewardship imperative. It's
Yeah.
the new, non-negotiable baseline for credibility and long-term influence.
So our mission in this deep dive is to really unpack that. We want to take ethics out of the abstract and make it a practical, repeatable discipline. And it all starts with a foundational shift in how we see things.
That shift is simple, but it's radical.
Hmm.
Leadership is not about ownership, it's about stewardship.
Okay.
If you adopt that paradigm, that all resources, people, capital, influence are trusts given by a higher proprietor, then accountability is no longer a chore. It transforms into the most reliable path to building durable trust.
That idea of entrustment is just so crucial. Viewing every asset from your budget to your influence, not as something you own, but as something placed temporarily in your care.
Exactly. It changes your whole attitude. And the quintessential insight here comes from the parable of the talents. A master entrusts money talents to his servants.
Right.
But the key insight people often miss is that the expectation wasn't simple preservation. The servant who buried his talent out of fear just to keep it safe was the one who was condemned.
Condemned for failing to engage, for not multiplying the asset.
Precisely. The master expected faithful engagement and multiplication. And what's critical for every leader listening is this. The standard is universal. It doesn't matter if you got 5 talents or just 1.
You're judged on what you did with what you had.
That's it.
But the sources are also quick to warn us this doesn't come naturally. There's a human tendency toward failure here. They argue a distortion, rooted in what's called the fall, introduce this pull toward self-interest and, well, idolatry.
We replace the ultimate proprietor with idols, power, reputation, short-term profit.
And we see the failure modes almost immediately in the sources.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Okay.
take Cain and Abel. Cain's failure was a failure of stewardship over his own internal resources, his emotions, his relationships.
And ultimately, life itself.
Yes. And when he's confronted, his response, "Am I my brother's keeper?" That is the classic organizational move of abrogating responsibility.
It's such a modern response, isn't it? Just deflecting the wider impact of your actions. And then if you scale that up, you get to the Tower of Babel.
Babel is corporate hubris personified. It wasn't just a building project. Humanity directed all its collective resources, its best technology, not for benevolent stewardship, but for radical self-glorification.
To make a name for ourselves.
The entire enterprise was redirected toward human ego instead of the original mission.
So these failures illustrate this bias toward self-interest. But the narrative also gives us a model of perfection. It introduces Christ as the perfect steward.
Yes, and that model is paramount because it provides a blueprint. The incarnation and the cross are presented as the ultimate acts of humility and self-sacrifice. This self-giving becomes the standard.
Okay, so I think this is where some listeners, maybe those operating on purely secular, rational models, might pause. When the sources say ethical capacity is achievable through grace, not just willpower, what's the practical strategic application of that?
That's a great question. We have to translate it. It means moving from a place of fear of consequences, fear of failure, which is what made the servant bury his talent, to a place of empowerment.
Okay.
When leaders operate from a conviction that they're serving a mission greater than themselves, they find the moral courage to resist the temptation of expediency. It's about shifting the source of your ethical energy.
So ethical stamina comes from conviction, not just discipline. And you definitely need that conviction because we need robust tools to cut through the noise.
Absolutely. So let's move to the practical how. The sources give us 3 simple yet profound lenses for evaluating any big decision.
All right, the first lens is long-term impact. And the danger here is obvious. Short-termism. The pressure of quarterly reports tempting leaders into shortcuts.
A steward has to resist the tyranny of the immediate. The steward's horizon, it doesn't end at the next fiscal year. It stretches into intergenerational impact.
A lasting legacy.
Exactly. The sources contrast builders who use gold, silver, costly stones with those who use wood, hay, straw.
That's a powerful metaphor. How do we apply that today? What's the difference between gold and straw in, say, corporate spending?
Well, it's quality versus transience. Gold and silver are investments in infrastructure, Foundational R&D, talent development, things that survive market cycles, enduring works.
And wood, hay, and straw.
That's the flimsy stuff. One-off marketing blisses, superficial CSR efforts, or cutting essential maintenance to boost a year-end profit margin. They burn up fast when scrutiny comes.
And the most visceral cautionary tale against that short-termism from the sources.
It has to be Esau, selling his invaluable birthright, his entire legacy, for a single bowl of stew just to satisfy immediate hunger. It's the ultimate failure of strategic valuation.
Right. Okay, moving to the second lens, fairness and equity. This is a distinction that causes a lot of confusion.
It does. Fairness is often just equal treatment, applying the same rule to everyone. But equity goes deeper. It recognizes different starting points. It requires giving tailored resources to those with greater need to get to a truly just outcome.
Leveling the playing field, not just starting the race at the same line.
Exactly. This lens demands a deeper stakeholder analysis. It introduces the principle of the preferential option for the poor and vulnerable.
So you have to give special weight and voice to those stakeholders who usually have the least power.
Absolutely. And to make this actionable, to help a leader shed their own bias, the sources suggest a thought experiment. The veil of ignorance.
Walk us through that. How would a leader actually use it?
Okay, so imagine you're making a key policy decision. Let's say restructuring the company's benefits package. Before you finalize it, you have to imagine you're walking into that new system without knowing where you will land.
You don't know if you'll be the CEO, the factory worker, the single parent.
Exactly. So you're forced to design a system that protects the most vulnerable, because you might be the most vulnerable. It forces a radical shift away from personal bias toward universal justice.
That brings us to our third lens, accountability. If we accept the premise of stewardship, we have to be answerable.
And that accountability is dual. First, there's ultimate accountability to the proprietor, the day of reckoning. Second, there's horizontal accountability to peers, boards, customers.
But in a world driven by optics, isn't horizontal accountability often compromised? How do the sources suggest we foster real integrity?
They stress the need for integrity in secret. The ultimate judge sees everything, whether internal audit does or not. That moral baseline is the foundation, but then you have to build systems to support it.
What are those non-negotiable systems?
Genuinely independent boards for oversight, rigorous independent financial audits, and safe, confidential whistleblower protections.
And those protections have to be real, not just a hotline.
They have to be tangible, a clear process that shields the reporter from retaliation. These structures replace fear with safety.
Okay, let's apply this framework. Let's start with financial stewardship, where integrity so often breaks down.
Financial stewardship is critical. Money is a tool for the mission, not a source of identity. So when you look at investments, you face a core dilemma: maximizing return versus ethical alignment.
Right. And many organizations feel forced to just choose the highest return, even if that means supporting things that violate their core values.
This is where ethical screening and positive impact investing becomes so important. A steward has to actively vet investments. That might mean divestment from companies involved in exploitation or active engagement to push for better practices.
And what about executive compensation? That can undermine trust so quickly.
It's a huge flashpoint. Compensation decisions have to balance fair market value with humility and modesty. They absolutely require independent board oversight, and the final pay structure must be congruent with the mission.
Otherwise, it erodes the trust of the very staff and donors supporting the work.
Completely.
All right, shifting to HR. The sources call people the most precious resource, using the phrase imago Dei.
Image of God. It means people aren't cogs in a machine. They have inherent worth. So the mandate for HR stewardship is massive. Honoring people includes striving to pay a living wage, not just the legal minimum.
That living wage concept is tough, though, especially for organizations in high-cost areas. How does a steward reconcile that?
It requires creative resource allocation and a commitment to internal equity, making sure pay is fair inside the organization, regardless of gender or negotiation skill. And if a living wage isn't immediately possible, the steward has to create a clear, transparent path to getting there.
And when termination becomes necessary, the sources warn against cold efficiency.
Termination is a critical moment. Performance management needs to be about growth, with due process. If termination is unavoidable, compassion is mandated. That means supportive severance, outplacement services, handling it with respect. You reinforce the person's worth, even as the professional relationship ends.
So even with good systems, we still have to guard against these pitfalls that erode stewardship.
Yes, And they're subtle. The first is shortcuts. Choosing expediency over integrity. Cutting corners on quality or safety to meet a deadline or a profit target.
The next one destroys culture. Favoritism or cronyism.
This is giving preference based on personal relationships over merit. The sources have a very strong warning against this, condemning discrimination based on status as judging with evil motives. For an organization, favoritism is poison.
If the rule setter is impartial, the systems must be too.
Exactly. And the final pitfall is neglecting wider consequences. Making a decision based only on narrow financial impact without considering the long-term societal, environmental, or community costs.
The factory polluting a river for profit.
That's the classic example.
To help leaders avoid these traps, the sources introduce a tangible tool, the Decision Stewardship Checklist.
This checklist is basically an intentional ethical pause. It forces a leader to rigorously run a complex choice through those three lenses: long-term impact, fairness, and accountability before making the final call.
Which brings us full circle. It's so clear that ethical stewardship is about owning the influence your decisions have on people, systems, and the future. Integrity isn't a cost, it's a strategic asset.
And that leaves us with a provocative thought that we'd encourage you to carry forward, especially when you're facing a high-stakes decision.
If future generations evaluated your leadership solely by the impact and consequences of your decisions, not your well-intentioned mission statement, what legacy would they genuinely see?